The program host and guest and not those of WPSL. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. It's time now for the Real Estate Pros Show. With the latest information from Jeff Rubin of Rescue Florida Realty, James Canada of Mortgage Plus Financial, Phil Resnick of Chapman and Primal Law, and experts from around the world. Call in with your questions and comments at 340-1590. Now, here's your host.
And good morning. I'm Jeff Rubin, and I'm here with James Canada. Phil Resnick is absent today. He's out saving the world from all those big bad banks or creditors or whomever, but he's out doing something good hopefully today. Today I'd like to discuss some things that really have to do with scenarios that a lot of you are probably involved with already, but what I'd like to do also is encourage you guys to call at 340-1590. That's 340-1590. And we can discuss anything that's on your mind in terms of real estate, not just the subjects that we're touching upon. Now, we did get some calls in the last few weeks, but they've been near the tail end of the show, and we didn't get the full benefit of really discussing those people's problems. Well, so today what I'm going to do is try to bring up a few scenarios that actually have occurred recently, and we can sort of talk about them. And whatever you do, obviously, you want to seek professional advice, whether it's legal, real estate, or CPA, whatever. One of the scenarios that I want to touch upon is something that just happened last week to a client that I have, and they all remain nameless, and it's just a little frustrating. They were in short sale. It was a investment property. The deal took several months to come to fruition, but we were able to get it fully approved by the lenders. And I say lenders. And as an investment property, typically an investor is supposed to know better. It's not a primary residence. They're not living there. And the banks are a lot less forgiving. Understandable. It's an investment. You took a risk, and you have to pay the piper. Now, if they do a short sale, then they're probably going to want to come after you, and they're going to want something to not come after you, you know.
Who do you mean by they?
Well, the banks, whoever the lender is or the servicer is, we're going to get a short sale approval, but it's probably going to have some verbiage in there that's going to say that they reserve their right to seek a deficiency if they're not already asking for something at closing, whether it's a promissory note or some cash or something. So, there's going to be some pain involved besides just the pain that they've gone through. And in this case, I like to say it was all of us, but it may have not been at Rescue Florida Realty. But the point is that we were able to successfully negotiate away the debt. However, when that does happen and it's not your primary residence, the lender by law has to issue what they call a 1099-C. Okay, and that's realized income basically on a forgiven debt. That's the way the IRS looks at it. And let me say, I'm not a tax professional, so I'm just talking what the scenario is here and based on my experience.
Well, now you've made it a tax burden and the IRS gets their money.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to expect you to report that on your taxes, obviously.
Sign away your firstborn
child.
child.
And you're going to have to pay some taxes on that.
And humongous interest.
Well, yeah, but, they're going to have to do something because it just doesn't magically disappear. But, the IRS is working with people these days because they really have to, because people can't pay. And they don't really have much to seize these days, if normal American anyway.
Right, the bank's getting the house.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have the right tax professional involved and you're proactive, you could figure out a scenario the IRS may work something out with your payment plan or something. Whatever it might be. Maybe what they call an offer in compromise, where you may owe taxes you can't pay, but they'll slash it down based on your particular hardship, and you just make a smaller payment and it goes away. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously, but the point is, getting back to the 1099-C, you have this 1099-C that, again, you're going to have to pay the IRS on. Well, these investors, a friend of a friend of a friend, who knows, who it really was, but these people came back and said, hey, this is great, we got all this done, we really appreciate it. We're we don't want a 1099-C. We were told that's bad. Well, obviously it's bad. It's never good when you owe money that you maybe can't afford to pay.
Now, I know you're not a tax professional. This would be a real good question probably for a tax professional, but when you do your taxes with that 1099-C, could you take the loss from the house as a deduction in any kind of way? Or have you ever heard of
I do
anything
not
like
think
that?
so, unless there was a substantial amount of money that was put down. But because the debt was forgiven, they treat it as realized income.
So you really didn't lose anything.
Yeah, again,
But
I'm
you
not.
owe
I'm
on it.
not. All right, I'm not really a tax professional. I
Right.
don't know about all how that
I'm
works
mucking
at
up
all.
the works, aren't I?
Yeah. Don't get me in any more trouble, please. I have no idea how that works.
Wow.
But the bottom line is that these people are going to owe someone somewhere, and
they have a hard time with it.
they have a real hard time with the fact that they're being forgiven almost $250,000 worth of debt. Did I say that? $250,000?
$250,000.
And-
$250,000 as an investor.
But they're going to be taxed on that amount.
No.
Right? No. Okay.
They're going to be they're going to be taxed on whatever the shortfall was, but they're
After the house is
basically
sold.
waiving that and whatever it's going to be. Let's say it's $90,000 that they would owe the IRS. Let's hypothetically say, because I don't know what the number is, but let's just pull a number out and say it's $90,000, and you'd have to work something out with the IRS. And if you couldn't afford it, again, you could go into certain programs that they have. And again, none of this is easy. But the bottom line is, Jim, the bottom line is that this person is going to let this property sell at the courthouse because they think somehow that's better than getting a 1099-C from the bank on a short sale.
So they're just going to let the foreclosure happen.
Correct.
Okay, and that's how they're then taking their loss. But aren't they also then at the end of the whole foreclosure process going to get a 1099-C anyway?
Well, yes and no. Here's and it could be a number of different scenarios, and this is why I think it's important to sort of understand and sort of go through this. Is they're not going to do a short sale. The property's already scheduled to be sold, by the way. But the bank was willing to do the short sale and just let it go that way. But now it's going to sell at the courthouse steps. Now, a lot of people don't understand how that works. Now, the way that works is the bank, unless there's other people involved bidding on a certain property at the courthouse, which can happen, but let's hypothetically, again, let's keep this simple and say the bank has no one bidding on this property except them. They put in an initial offer of $100 at the auction. They win it. Do they pay that $100? No, they don't pay the $100. Basically, it's just taken off of what they're losing. Okay?
All right.
So they get that property. So now let's say that
Or if they have a lot of money invested, they want to make sure they get that property so that they can try to recoup that money later. So they're
Correct.
buying the property from themselves.
yeah, right, and they don't really have to. Yeah, I mean, they don't have to put any money out.
Right.
So they're bidding on something that they owe if it's going to be higher than the threshold of whatever they're going to decide whether it's going to be something they decide to let go to someone else that's bidding against them or
Right.
not.
And if I was bidding, I couldn't go, well, $10 over here, because then they'd go, no, I'm sorry. Then they'd keep it. They'd bring it up to keep that property in their
Typically,
name.
yeah. I mean, stranger
Okay.
things have happened, obviously, but yes. Now, so let's say that hypothetically this was a $350,000 mortgage, and they're going to take $100 off of that, and let's say now they're going to go after them, and let's see, they're going to add court costs, attorney's fees, filing, anything that's interest, any other penalties that they're owed in their mortgage or their note. I mean, this thing could get out of control even further.
But let me ask you this. Can they file bankruptcy at that point?
Again, I'm not an attorney, but
Yeah.
yes.
Now, with that, they could not if it was the IRS. But they can
Right.
if the bank is coming after them.
That's correct. However, that being said, you have to qualify just like anything else to do a bankruptcy. It's not as easy as just going in and
Right.
filing for bankruptcy. You have to have sufficient amount of debt, and there's certain scenarios that
So
play
they're
out.
in a lot of trouble if they own other rental properties.
They're in trouble if they have other properties, if they have other assets. And in this case, this person is a partner in another business, which could be affected by that, possibly. It could be affected in many ways. I mean, it's just, it's not as simple as just saying, well, I don't want the 1099-C, let the property go, and I'm scot-free, because it doesn't work that way.
And the scary thing is this is happening in every corner of America right now.
That's correct.
You see, and And that's where I personally, and I'd love to hear comments on this, Sid, because I'm going to say some things that's probably going to raise, some hairs on the back of some people's necks. Give us a call. Give us comments at 340-1590. But again, as a former Wall Street trader, I traded on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. When we're not talking about homeowners here. People own a home, life hits, life happens, and guess what? Sometimes, these situations happen, the bad situation happens to good people. We're talking about an investor. This is an investor. You're laying out your money at risk to go ahead and try to make a profit. And when it doesn't work out so well, you can't, basically it sounds to me like you're saying, nope, do over. I want to get done. I mean, I personally lost $199,000 in one day on a trade. Now, granted, we made a lot more than we lost a lot of times, but I couldn't turn around and say, no, sorry, no, do over. I want to try that over again. You're going to be an investor. There's certain rules to it. And one of those rules is you're going to lose money. And the key to investing, real estate, stocks, old cars, paint things, whatever it is, you're going to lose money. The key is to make more than you lose. And I have a hard time with even an investor standing there, like you said, talking from advice from a friend of a friend of a friend, even being offered such a really, in my opinion, a nice deal from the banks.
Well,
a short sale.
It was a great deal, okay?
Right.
But let's say what I tried to explain to these people, these investors, was that let's say that you lose the house in the foreclosure sale, and the bank decides, after looking, let's say, at your credit, that they're not going to spend the money to go after you because they don't think it's wise. It's not a good business decision for them to spend more good money after bad, let's say.
Right.
Okay, great. Guess what? 1099-C, now it's going to be for a higher amount than what the short sale number was. So how is this helping the situation? I guess, to me, it all boils down to, when you're in these type of situations, and hopefully you don't get into a corner like these people did and have to make a quick decision, and unfortunately I think got some bad advice from someone that they know, make sure that you have a good, qualified group of professionals, attorneys, tax professionals, real estate professionals, mortgage people, that you go to them and you make sure that they're well-rounded, that they're well-versed in foreclosures and bankruptcy and those types of things. Ask the tough question. Have you ever done this before? Have you ever come across this scenario before? What are your thoughts on it? What do you know about it? Just because someone's a CPA, and again, I'm not knocking CPA, just like I'm not knocking anyone, just because someone's a CPA doesn't mean that they have any experience in these types of scenarios, because up until probably 4 years ago, most people didn't have any experience in these scenarios, right. Short sale, foreclosure, or otherwise. Obviously, there's been foreclosures, but not as rampant as they are now, and so people aren't as educated as they are now in these scenarios.
Jeff, I was with Wells Fargo. I was their top producer in my division in the state of Florida, number 4 in the southeast portion of the United States of America. And I'll never forget the day I asked the managing partner. He ran the southeast portion of America for Wells Fargo, major bank. I said, "You ever hear of this thing called a short? I think it's called refinance. What the heck is that?" That was about 5 years ago. Yeah, so it's it's like
right.
What goes credence what you're saying.
Yeah, and it again, let's say that they decide to pursue the deficiency after the foreclosure. They're going to take them to court. They're going to sue them. They're going to win, and now they've got a judgment. Now they can garnish wages. Now they can attach assets. I mean, this is not just as simple as just saying, I don't want to do it, and walk away and put your head back in the sand. And that's why I implore people to do that are listening, or even people that are just out there in general. Okay, you cannot put your head in the sand.
Right.
Be proactive and be ready, because the other side is. And they're going to do something at some point, and you need to be ready to react to it. So you need to make sure you have some qualified people, or at least seek some advice, not just, from a friend of Aunt Betty's.
Right.
It's just not going to help you in those scenarios.
And even if Aunt Betty went through the identical situation you went through, Aunt Betty's situation is not your situation. Yeah, and each one is specific to really what we call it a financial snapshot. It's your financial fingerprint. And that's going to dictate what kind of program you have available to you.
All right. Well, we're going to get into a couple other scenarios when we get back. We encourage you to call 340-1590, and we'll be back right after this.
And you're listening to the Real Estate Pros Show here on WPSL 1590. Back to your host, Jeff Rubin.
Thank you, Veronica. Okay, so we just finished up with one scenario about a short sale and how an investor didn't want the 1099-C, and I think they're going to cause themselves much more problems now and down the road for themselves than they realize, and it's sort of unfortunate. But I want to switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about sort of a positive scenario. We have a person who is in a house, they've been in the house for quite some time, and they actually have equity.
Really?
The rare person in Florida that actually has
equity. Is it
equity.
St. Lucie County? I don't know.
I'm not going to say where they're from.
All right.
But they actually have equity. And so the question was, they call their bank. Well, again, I'm going to keep silent who that is. And they're like, yeah, we can refi. You know, I think they're at like 4 point something. Let's say 4.2. Let's just say 4.2. And they're current. They have no problems. Like I said, they have equity. And the question was asked, what do we do to get our rate down? Because the rates are so much lower now. And, can we get it any lower? Can we push it down? Oh, yes, we can do that. But it's going to cost you $2,200 in some costs and some fees and stuff like that. And then when you start amortizing that out, does it pay someone to do that if they're going to save $100-something a month or $200 a month or whatever?
That's a substantial savings, $100, $200 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if they're comfortable with that current payment, yet the new payment's going to be $100, $200 more a month, they can just continue to make the payment they're normally used to making at $100 or $200 a month premium and pay that house off really, really fast.
But what about the closing costs involved? So let's say, for argument's sake, it was $2,200. I mean, that's still going to take them a couple of years if you amortize that.
Well, first, you have to look at what's really called a closing cost. That's a kind of vague term. It's been thrown out there a lot. A closing cost, in the sense of a lender, is an underwriting fee, an origination fee to the bank or the broker who put you into the loan, credit report fees, recording fees with the county. A closing cost is not setting up escrows, homeowners insurance. That's a cost. Whether you had a mortgage or not, you're going to have those fees, those costs. When you set up an escrow account, yes, it's going to be lumped into the overall net payment, but it's technically not a closing cost because it's your money. At any point, you can refinance the loan, sell the house, and get whatever money's left in that balance back to you. It's your money. Mm-hmm. It's just being held at the lender in an account. But to get back to the question that I think you're alluding to is, if a person owed 18 years on a mortgage, what point when you're factoring in, they're going to get a lower rate, but now going to drop them all the way back to a 30-year potentially. It's what most lenders want to do, and then add closing costs, and usually in a refinance transaction on top of the existing loan balance. Where does it make sense?
So they're going to add. So hypothetically, if they owed 200,000, they would add the fees on top of the 200.
Right. Let's assume they owed, for simplicity of math, $100,000, but $3,000 would be the total costs to refinance that loan. So their new loan, they could either come to closing when they sign their refinance documents with that $3,000. They're welcome to do that, or they can go ahead and add it to the overall loan amount.
But then they have to pay interest on that.
You do have to pay interest on the $3,000, but it's $3,000 interest over the amortization of the
And at your new rate.
and at the new lower rate. So, and again, what a good lender will do, and this is what we do for a lot of our clients, is we measure out, one, is it worth it? Just because you can get a low rate, is it worth 1,000 cents? I had a woman who was lowering her rate from this was last week, 6% all the way down to 4%. Okay, it actually could have went lower, but her credit wasn't that great. And the long story short, she was going to end up saving like $30 a month, and her term would have been added 7 years back to 30 years. So what we ended up doing was telling her no, it's not in the best interest for you. But what you could end up doing was we measured out. Ask your lender on a refinance transaction the amortization schedule. Ask them to measure out how much interest you have left to pay on your current loan now versus the overall interest you're going to have on a new one. Now, if you go into a bank, ask your bank if they'll do a term, pick a term, basically. There's some lenders out there, like I know Quicken Loans, just one of the lenders we wholesale through. You can pick, I want a 16-year mortgage. They'll give you a 16-year mortgage.
Is that the Yorkage that we're hearing so much about on TV? Yorkage?
You
pick it out? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good. And that.
Can I pick out my interest rate? I'd like to pay 0, please.
Actually, could you pay me?
Yeah, that would be better.
Yes, on a reverse loan, but no. Yeah, well, that's a totally different.
Hey, you can do that, right?
Yes, you could. Well, technically, it's
if you qualify.
If you qualify, right? Which is easy to qualify on reverse loans. You're 62. But, no, but back to that. It's math. It takes some effort to do on the lender's part. So don't just say, yeah, I want to lower my rate because it's the trendy thing to do. See if it goes lower. And now what I'm going to also throw out there is, if you're comfortable with the payment you have right now, say your payment is $1,000 and the new payment will be $800. If you're comfortable with the $1,000, continue to pay the $1,000. Pay $800 and then $200 towards additional principal, and you'll be amazed at how much of an impact that'll make on paying off that mortgage rather quickly.
So basically what you're saying is that you just have to do your homework?
Do your homework, or pay someone to do it.
or pay someone to
do
it.
I mean, that's, I mean, I had a woman tell me she has a local air conditioning HVC company, her and her husband, and she's like, look, I'm so sorry, I'm not into all these terms and what you do. Forgive me if I ask you the repetitive questions. And I looked and I go, look, if you asked me to tell you how many BTUs goes in my AC, I would have no clue. Pay your professional.
It's time for news.
Okay, let's do that.
We're going to take a break for the Florida news. You can call in with questions and comments. 340-1590 here at WPSL 1590. Now back to the Real Estate Pro Show here on WPSL 1590. Back to your host, Jeff Rubin.
Thank you. Just before we broke, we were going over refi situation, and if you have any questions in regards to that, you can always go on to your website, which is mpfgonline.com. Is that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, mpfgonline.com. And if you have any real estate related questions, certainly give us a call here right now, 340-1590. You can visit my website, which is rescuefloridarealty.com. That's rescuefloridarealty.com.
That's a cool name, isn't it?
Well, I think Florida needs to be rescued these
That's
days.
true.
So I'm sure there's lots of other states that need to be rescued too, but I'm here. So we were talking about this situation, different scenarios. We started with one about a short sale with an investor and how he didn't want a 1099-C, and it's probably not going to work out very good for him in the long run. We talked about someone who actually had equity in a property and how that works in terms of refi and whether it's good or not, and how to possibly figure that out or consult someone who does. And then, of course, there's a scenario in regards to going back to a short sale where you have someone that is an owner-occupant. So now this is their primary residence, and they're getting to the end here where they're going to get an approval. And what I like to remind people is in a short sale scenario, if you have more than one mortgage, so most people have two mortgages these days, or had two mortgages. The first mortgage drives the ship. They're the ones that make the decision on how much the second is going to get at the short sale. They're the ones that are going to decide what the fees basically are. There are certain guidelines, but they're the ones that basically are going to say what they want to pay and what they don't want to pay. And then what ends up happening is you have sort of a legal negotiation between the first and the second. Basically, it's like the second saying, all right, we want this amount, and let's say it's $6,000, and the first says, sorry, our guidelines say you're only going to get $2,000. Or let's say they agree, but let's say the first comes across and says, we're going to give the homeowner some walking money. Because a lot of these programs that we've talked about in previous shows offer that, whether they're cash for keys, financial assistance in terms of moving, because a lot of people are in dire straits and they need that money to just get out of the house and
don't destroy it.
Right. Well, it also encourages them to keep the house in good shape.
Leave the air conditioner behind.
That's correct.
And the copper.
Yeah.
So the scenario is,
I ran into a very a scenario, and it's kind of frustrating because the bank on the first is actually agreed to a short sale. And they've actually, on top of agreeing to a short sale, agreed to give the borrower, the seller of the home who's exiting that property, $3,000.
Which is typical. It sounds like it's probably like a half a deal or an inside half a type deal that the lender is involved with. So $3,000 is a typical valuation that they would give a homeowner.
And everyone's happy. The buyer of the home is happy, the seller exiting is happy, and the short-selling lender on the first is extremely happy because they can get rid of this property and move on. But there is a second mortgage on the loan, and on the home. The second mortgage lender agrees to short sale their second, but then found out that the seller of the home who's exiting will be receiving $3,000. They pulled back. Yeah, they pulled back their approval and said it's either going to come to us or not to them, or there's no deal.
And so basically they're going to cut their nose off to spite their faces, the cliche may be, because what ends up happening is if this deal goes south, what's the alternative?
Foreclosure.
And what happens to a second in foreclosure?
Good luck. Yeah.
Yeah, it really becomes zero. They'll walk away with nothing, and then they're going to have to figure out a way to try to come after the homeowner or former homeowner at that point to try to recoup anything. Right. So it's sort of a strange situation. I don't really understand why a second would even do something like that. It doesn't make much sense, but again, we go back to common sense just isn't one of those things that works. I don't understand why a second would, when they have a deal like that, they would want to squash it. it's a little short-sighted, and I really wonder if the people in charge fully understand the ramifications, because I can't believe that they do.
Well, the borrower is now looking to buy the home. He's sitting there saying, I don't want to be involved. This is a mess. I'm going to go buy another house. So it's really not helping the community in this situation here. So it's the house is going to go to foreclosure, and as we, the statistics from Realty Track are out, foreclosures are selling at 34% below market value. So here, at least when it's being sold short, it's being sold short at the current market value. If it's going to go to foreclosure, it's going to get sold less, so it's going to drive home prices even lower.
So if you're an investor who owns stock in a bank, you really should be asking questions.
Hey, wait a minute! I am an investor. I still own a stock in that second lender. But and you know what? When we do mention banks, please understand. Don't go yanking your money out of your checking account over, Chase or wherever, just because we made a comment about them. They're totally different divisions at these banks. So your teller and your branch manager, local bank's probably a very good person, and we're not slamming them.
Well, we're not trying to slam anyone. We're just trying to
state the facts
and use some common sense on the show. That's something that is dearly lacking these days in the financial sector when it comes to mortgages and the foreclosure crisis. And we're going to go to a call now. David?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, David.
Hi. I have to first admit that I actually haven't been able to listen to most of your program because I've been working on my yard outside, but I kind of caught little bits and pieces, so I thought, among other things, I wanted to get your contact information. I'll just mention a few things about my situation. I don't know if any of it's applicable or not, but you can tell me what your comments are.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I bought a house, which was a short sale last year here in Florida. I got about a 5% interest rate, which I guess was okay for that time. And I've heard that, rates have been going down as much as, a little under 4%. And I made contact with some kind of a mortgage service recently that said, oh, yeah, I can get you, lower rate, cut down on your, monthly expenses based on the fact that you're, I forget it was back based on maybe the fact that I'm a veteran, among other things. I use the VA, home loan program. So I'm still thinking about that, even though they wanted me to collect all these different documents, kind of like I was, starting from the beginning. And I'm thinking, well, do I have to really go through this whole process all over, even though I've already gotten approved and I've got to own the house and all this? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Quick question: How long ago did you buy the home?
I bought the home in April last year.
Okay. Well, when you're applying, even though it's going to go through, if you're a veteran and it's a VA loan, it's going to go through like a veteran a streamlined process. So it will be a little bit easier to qualify in terms of the document you're going to need to provide. Now, there may even be a case where you're not going to have the home appraised, which is really beneficial, especially in this market. But here's the big but: you are applying for a new loan, even if it's with the same lender. So you're going to need to have your credit checked. They may ask for asset documentation. They may ask for income documentation. Depending on your profile as a whole, basically they put into a computer system, and if it's veterans, it'll come through Fannie Mae's automated system through VA, and it'll spit out the documentation needed. And that's how any loan is determined what's needed. So it's really not the lender or the person you're dealing with. It's the actual system program you're applying through.
So basically, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, I know these people told me, that's we can't do anything about these talking about it. But it's like all these things like. Bank statements for the last 2 months, and all kinds of other asset documents, and I forget, but just so many documents, and I'm thinking to myself, if I have to look for all, because I since I moved down here, some of my stuff has kind of got misplaced. Like, for instance, they wanted my Social Security card, and I said, I left that in New York. I'm sorry, I don't even have that here.
You have to understand that it also has a lot to do with just the climate of lending in general. There's so many more restrictions now and guidelines, and things are just so much tighter than they were because they want to be sure that even though you're already a customer and you're already making payments on a loan, they really want to make sure that if they give you a new loan that you're not just going to stop making payments. That they're just a lot stricter now.
Well, and one thing, and I run across this one a lot, when one of the things we ask for is a copy of a client's a driver's license, social security card. And the driver's license is easy. Social security card, a lot of people, I'm like, I don't know where this is. I haven't seen this thing in years. But there's a huge reason why you need that. And it's not for the lender. It's not for me. It's to satisfy the federal government for the Patriot Act. They want to make sure, first and foremost, that, honestly, and a lot of people chuckle, but they want to make sure you're not a terrorist or on some sort of watch list. The second one, and it applies more towards a purchase transaction, laundering of money. And when you speak to someone who's legitimate, which 99.9% of the people are, they all laugh. I'm like, oh, well, of course I'm not laundering money. Of course I'm not, a terrorist.
Right.
But they're doing that. The majority is being affected for that 0.1%.
Well, you're producing the card so you can prove that you're not borrowing someone's number.
Well, that's another valid thing. Yeah, it's for legal identification, right?
I mean, there was just
Although on your Social Security card, doesn't it say something about not proof
to be
of
used for
identification?
ID.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, it's very funny because everyone asks for it anyway. But I guess the other point is, James.
Well, technically speaking, though, we asked those two forms because it was common forms. It's very similar to when you're looking to do like voter registration, where you just have to perform two forms of government ID.
Well, what I was going to say was a lot of this also has to do with the amount of mortgage fraud that was going on, and even is still going on to some extent in various circles, and so much so that the FBI has its own division now for this. This is a very serious matter now, and it's not just as simple as getting a slap on the wrist.
I actually have I have a client of mine. He's done 2 transactions. Now, he used to be a former New York police detective. He started, believe it or not, after 9/11. You remember Jack Bauer from the show 24? That was the what they call it? What was the unit they called? CTU, Counterterrorist Unit. That was Jack Bauer. Believe it or not, New York City never had that. Well, after 9/11, he was instituted. He actually just created it and manned it up. Well, he retired and moved to Florida. And now what he does, he is actually a detective for the banks, private investigator for the banks, and they give him stacks and stacks of paperwork for people who commit mortgage fraud. And the first questions on there is, number one, does the person live there as their primary residence? Number 2 is, did they lie about their income? He gets every nook and cranny that person put on their original loan application, and everything's fine. Everyone wants to, maybe cut a little corner, or back in the day. Now you got to document everything. But back in the day, they would cut a little corner about exact income, exact assets, and it's no problems until someone misses a mortgage payment. Then all of a sudden, they're getting investigated. And it's a federal crime. When they sign page 4 of a loan application, in fine print it says, please make sure this is all correct and you're attesting to the information on this form, or it's a federal crime. You're considered lying. And I can't tell you how many times he would call me. He'd go knock on a door. And he would call me up initially when he was talking to people, because he would use me as hey, look, am I reading this 1003 right? And I would give him some points and tips.
What's a 1003?
Well, a loan application. It's a 4 to 5 page document. When I say to 5 is like the continuation sheet. And you're listing out everything on there, from your social security number to your addresses, to your work addresses, to your children's DNA and hair and eye color. No, I'm kidding. But you're listing everything out. Now, why are the lenders now so strict and wanting to see documentation on? I can't tell you. You find someone with an 800 credit score, putting 20% down, have enough assets to buy the house cash, and they're running them through the ringer on little things like produce to me a social security card. Again, it's nothing personal. It's because of the masses that the masses are being punished because of the minority that lied and would fraud. And now these are the new laws that are in place.
Yeah, it's it's a different world, like we've said before, with real estate. And when it comes to lending, it's a lot more difficult.
David, did I kind of answer your question? I know we kind of went down a bunny trail
yeah,
there.
but not the way I was hoping you would answer my question. Because I'm just thinking the fact that I'm such a new, home purchaser, and all my, documentation is, it's all fairly recent. I mean, I'd be happy to come and meet somebody in person to show them my face, show them my military retired ID. They want to see it. I mean, it seems like, putting somebody like myself through the ringer just because there's other people that are, trying to defraud the government. I mean, I don't quite get that.
I agree. No,
it's easier to keep honest people honest, though, than it is to catch the people who really are trying to work around the system.
It's not fair, but I'm actually very sympathetic to you, and I agree to you. And I can't tell you, you're not alone in this. There's so many people who ask me the same exact questions, and I don't work for a bank, so it's not like you say, well, at such and such bank, this is our policy. I deal with over 60 banks in the United States of America, and each and every one of them put every borrower through the same scrutiny.
Yeah, and I see it on the other end when people are trying to get out of loans. I mean, they have to provide the same amount of paperwork that they got into the loan, if not more paperwork, to get out of the loan. And that's because they want to make sure that these people have legitimate hardships or telling the truth, because there's a lot of people, and something we touched upon last week, who are defaulting strategically. And obviously the banks are not going to go out of their way to help those people. So it's paperwork intensive, whether you're getting a loan or trying to get out of a loan these days.
Oh, please, I can't tell you. I have files that look like phone books. They're gigantic.
So, David, you basically are looking to refi, but you're just upset because they're asking for all this paperwork that you think that you've already provided recently, so why are they asking for it again?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and if I can sort of put it in the scenario of what I deal with on the other end with short sales, we'll provide paperwork to them, and they'll drag their feet for 60 days, try to make a decision, and then on the 61st day, they'll contact us and say, well, we don't have any update, but all of this information you've provided us, the bank statements, the income statement, even the hardship letter, are more than 60 days old. We need new ones now.
Yeah, well, I understand, being able to, or, having to provide, recent bank statements and maybe doing a credit check just to see if, anything's changed. But like I say, I mean, to have to go through all this other stuff.
Well, there's really not much more than that.
No?
Just some income documentation. And honestly, if you had an issue saying, look, I just can't find my Social Security card, honestly, it's a 10-minute procedure going over to the Social Security office right here on US 1 in Port St Lucie.
Yeah, except I think actually that came up for something totally different where I needed to do that, and somebody said, oh, yeah, you can just apply for another Social Security card. But what I found out was in order to do that, you have to have your birth certificate, and I think my birth certificate is with my Social Security card up in New York now. So,
wow.
Again, I'm stuck. I'd have to make a special trip to New York just to get those documents because nobody would be able to find them where I stored them.
So, Jim, how would he be able to contact you?
Give me a call at my office. It's 772.
Okay, hold on. Let me write this down. Okay, 772
403
Uh-huh.
5848.
Okay.
And if you're missing that documentation, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll find alternate ways to make it work. So never let something like that, if it's the right situation for you to go ahead and refinance and lower the rate and lower the payment and even maybe the term, again, whatever your situation may be, don't be stopped for having to provide some pieces of little paper. We can get around that properly,
Right.
So, all right.
All right, thank you for calling, David.
Yeah, okay.
All right, take care.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, so
So now, if he had like VA money coming to him, you can help him with that as well.
Well, what do you mean by VA money?
Well, if he had a VA loan or he had, because you have each person has like a limited amount of VA.
Well, it sounds to me like he has a loan through the VA, and which are nice loans. If you can qualify for them, that's actually a good program for veterans.
What's interest look with the VA these days?
It's a little bit higher than FHA, so it's in general. And if anyone's looking for rates, go to www.bankrate.com, and you'll see they'll give you the 30-year average for these rates. Now, granted, that's the 30-year average. Just because a posted rate might be 3.75, that may not be your rate. Interest rates are predicated upon what you qualify for. Honestly, the size of your loan. The smaller the loan, as ridiculous as it's going to sound, the higher the risk to the lender. Because again, remember, everything's done not in the specific. They're not pointing a finger at you saying, we don't think you're going to pay
they're
us.
not going to make as much money either in the long run.
No, it has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
It's the pool of risk pools. That's everything is built upon risk pools. And throughout the United States, a loan that's under $50,000 has a higher default ratio than a loan that's $225,000.
Why is that?
Well, again, it's because if someone's getting a $50,000 loan, there's probably a better probability that they don't have a lot of reserves, and they're maybe living
I would think they would have
paycheck.
and some equity maybe though. I would think they'd have equity if they were taking a smaller loan.
On a purchase. No, not necessarily.
Okay.
You could be buying a home for
Okay.
$50,000, $60,000, and
See, I'm not thinking homes are that priced, and they are.
Yeah, no,
they really are.
Yeah, but or even if they put more money down. So now, even though you have a 20% equity position, that's going to help your interest rate, but you're going to get it's called a risk adjuster for having a loan size that's low. Nationwide, the average the percentages say there's a higher default ratio on a small loan because, quite honestly, most people getting $50,000 loans, if they lose their job, they're going to lose the house.
It's just not fair.
It's not. And again, it feels to a lot of people like they're being pointed at with their finger, but that's really the only way a bank can properly do it.
It's one of those things where you're like, oh, I don't want that much money, but it would be better if I took more money.
My personal situation, I actually, 4 or 5 years ago, took out a loan, a small loan, on my home, refinanced, and it paid for me to actually get a bigger loan to get a smaller rate. Now, I thought I was real slick a couple of years ago, getting a 6% interest rate, and now I was like, wow, I am the man, and everyone was, up at 6.5 or, almost maybe 7%. Now I'm looking at saying, is it beneficial for me to refinance this loan, even to get a small loan, because it's such a small loan that I took out that it won't make a lot of dollars and cents for myself. So I'm just going to stay with a 6% interest rate, believe it or not, because by the time I refinance and look at the amount of money I'm going to save versus the extra cost and the extra years that'll be added onto the loan, it just wouldn't do it. So,
Well, I think this has sort of been interesting. We're talking about refinancing and how it equates to today's world, and a higher interest rate sometimes is just a better scenario because of the size of the loan. And so there's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at refining, and that's why it's always important to consult some good quality professionals in regards to those things. and because you could end up, even though you think you're helping yourself, you could be hurting yourself.
Right.
So there's lots of things to think of. And we thank you for listening in today, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you.